Well, let me ask you the first question. Where do you remember getting the extraordinary laugh, which is one of the first things that people ask me about when they say that when they find out that I know you, is where did his laugh come from?
My mother, she told me never to hold back on anything. If I have to sneeze, sneeze. If you have to laugh, laugh. Don't hold it back. She says it's good for your health.
Oh, that's good. Well, you followed that advice. When we were working years ago, Bill and I have a history of doing a book together about his life. We talked an awful lot about your mother. She died long before then. I never met her. But I did know your father, Mr. Charlie. And it seemed to me in discussing and getting to know you that an awful lot of your character comes from those family people. I think the most memorable line you ever spoke to me was that you thought your character was formed by the fact that you never had a doubt that both of your parents loved you. Is that correct?
That's the first thing I can remember as a person. Is that you're a baby, then the world opens up to you. Well, I always had the confidence that my mother and father loved me. And what they taught me was, is that if they loved me, I must be okay. So if other people encounter me and they have a problem with me, my father said, that's their little red wagon. And so I've never worked to be liked, because that would be hypocritical to me. If I wanted to do things to make somebody like me, what is it worth?
A little background, you grew up in Louisiana, born in 1934 in Monroe, Louisiana, the second son of Katie and Mr. Charlie Russell. The other figure that we talked about a lot in your childhood was your grandfather, well, both your grandfathers, but primarily grandfather Russell, whom you call the old man.
Yes. He was extraordinary. One time in Louisiana, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan had this black guy out in the woods beating him. And you could hear him screaming and crying for mercy, at least a mile away. So my grandfather heard that, went and got his shotgun and loaded it with bird seed, and went out and shot into the crowd about a half a dozen times. And it dispersed the crowd. And he never went to see if the guy, he just left. And he's talking about old Doc something or other. So he's picking out bird seed for a week. And when my father was born, my grandfather realized in that part of Louisiana, there was no school for the black children. So he decided he got to talk to some other guys, and they got together enough money, and they went to the lumber yard and bought some lumber. And they bargained and negotiated and got to pay for the lumber, and went and got the wagon and the mules to take the lumber to the site they were going to build a schoolhouse. So when they got back to the lumber yard to pick up the lumber, the guy at the lumber yard said, "What you boys going to do with all this lumber?" Well, one of them in the crowd said, "We're going to build a schoolhouse for the kids." He said, "They don't need to know how to read to pick cotton. In fact, I'm not going to let you do anything like that. I'm not going to sell you the lumber." So my grandfather says, "Okay, well, just give my money back." He said, "No, I'm not going to do that either." There's no agreement that a white man has to respect with a bunch of black boys. So my grandfather said, let me get this straight. You're not going to give us the lumber, and you're not going to give us the money back. Well, the third option is I'll have to kill you. I went to get a shotgun. And so the guy in the lumberyard said, well, you guys have that lumber. And so they built the schoolhouse, and they got together $53 to hire a teacher for a year to teach at this school that they just built. And that was the kind of stuff where he says, he says you didn't take nothing off of nobody. And along that line, my grandfather never went to school one single day. My father went to the 6th grade and he dropped out. I did 4 years at the University of San Francisco. And my youngest child, my daughter, graduated from Harvard Law School. So that's the evolution of the family from my grandfather to my kids, from law school to Harvard Law School.
But at the time you were born in 1934, your mother already, even though your father had practically no schooling and your grandfather had none, she valued education so much, she named your middle name as Felton after the president of, I think, Southern University at the time, is that right?
His name was Felton Clark. And so she gave me Felton to set me on a path that I was thinking about going to college. In fact, my mother died of kidney failure, okay? And she was in the hospital sick, and she knew she was dying. So she called my father and said, I want you to promise me something, that you'll send my boys to college. And my father said he promised. So when she died, we took her to Louisiana to be buried. And while I was there, she had 5 sisters. And they were debating who was going to take me and who's going to take my brother. And he says, that debate is no value. I'm going to take them back to California and raise them myself. They says, no man can raise kids. He says, well, I promised their mother I would try. So he sold his business and went to work in a foundry for less a week than he had been making a day. And
the reason he did that is because he wanted
he had to be
time at home.
Yes, he had to be home every night. He says, you can't let kids raise themselves. And so, and I understood that. And I appreciated that. I loved him, He was like his 75th birthday. And we were talking, and I said, I love you. He says, well, I love you too. That was the first time he'd ever said that. But I knew it.
Yeah. I think you said at one time that when he took you and your brother back to Oakland, you went back on the train, right?
Right.
From your mother's funeral. This is in 1946. You're 12.
Yeah. Right.
It's very, very unusual that a single father, a widower, would raise his 2 boys. And he said I think you said he talked to you the whole way back about how you were going to live without your mother.
Yes. He said you had a tremendous loss. But you got to live the way she wanted you to live. And she wanted you to be educated. And I don't know much about it, but I'll help you whenever I can.
And he said you're going to cook and clean and...
Well, we had a setup where the week that I cooked, my brother washed the dishes. And then the next week he'd cook and I'd wash the dishes. And There was no gourmet cooks in that house.
I think I remember even earlier at one point you said that down in Louisiana, Mr. Charlie would come home from work sometimes and the whole family would go out to play and he would carry all of you?
Yes, well, he was a big, strong guy, okay? 6'3", 220 pounds. And we had this huge field with tall grass, like right in front of the house. And we'd go play hide and seek in the tall grass. When they get to our starting point, he put my brother on one arm, me on the other arm, and my mother on his back, and run full speed across that field. And I thought he was such a Superman.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he was a lot of things that he'd always, when I was playing for the Celtics, and I was up in Cutchers in the Catskills, and Red Auerbach and I were talking, and one of the waiters came and said, "Did you hear what happened to Wilt?" And I said, "No, what, did you get a car wreck or something?" Because he used to drive fast. And he says, "No, he just signed a contract for $100,000 a year. That's the first time any NBA player had reached that plateau." In fact, I think Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, and I think Willie Mays were the only pro athletes making $100,000. So I says to Red, "Well, I know what I want." He says, "What's that?" I says, $100,001. Because I just won the MVP in this league. Okay? So he said, "Okay." So I go back to my room, I call my father up, and I says, "Dad, you won't believe this. They're going to pay me $100,000 a year to do this." Tell you the reason I called you is tell you now, you don't have to work anymore. I'll make enough that I can take care of the rest of the way. He says, "I don't want your damn money. I got my own money." I says, "But that job you got's terrible." He's working in a foundry. He says, "Listen, I've given these people 35 of the best years of my life. Now, I'm going to give them a few of the bad ones."
That sounds like Mr. Charlie. I'd like to back up just a little bit for when you left Monroe, Louisiana, because as I understand it, at any rate, your family was part of what we now understand as the Great Migration, or at least the World War II migration. A friend of mine wrote a book about it, Isabel Wilkerson, The Warmth of Other Suns, and
I met that lady.
she's a wonderful writer. And anyway, he left before your mother's funeral. He left Louisiana. And migrated first to Detroit and then out to Oakland.
Right.
What could you tell us exactly how that happened and why it happened?
Well, he's working at his bag factory, and he asked for a raise. And the boss says, "I can't give you a raise, Charlie. If I give you a raise, you'll be making as much as some of the white fellas, and I can't pay one of you boys as much as I pay the white guys." And he used the N-word to my father, just like it was nothing. And so my father was at home that night, and he was talking out loud. He says, "You know, I'm going to have to leave here, because if I stay here, who will raise my kids?" And they said, "Well, you can raise them." He said, "No, if I stay here, either I'll kill one of them or one of them will kill me. And either way, there'll be nobody to raise my kids." So we started working on going to Detroit. And the Ford Motor Company was hiring anybody that showed up on the wartime.
This is during World War II.
Yes. So we made arrangements to go to Detroit. Well, Saturday at noontime was payday at the factory. And he says to the boss, well, this is my last day. What do you mean? Well, no, I'm not coming back. This is it. That's after he got the check. So the guy says, Charlie, if you worry about that raise, I'll tell you what. You just log in 2 more hours, and that'll be your raise. You don't have to do the work, just log in. And my father said, no, this is it. See, the guy thought he was upset about the raise, but he's upset about the boss saying the N-word to him to his face.
Right.
And so...
and that wasn't the only incident like that
right.
He had.
That kind of stuff happened all the time.
I remember you told one about at a gas station once where the
yes.
guy just pumped other people's gas and left him sitting there.
Well, my father thought that he was being totally disrespected all the time. Mm-hmm. So when he told the guy he was leaving, it was noontime. At 6 o'clock the same day, he got on a train to Little Rock, okay? Headed for Detroit. That was on Saturday. Monday morning, this guy shows up at our house looking for him. He was from the draft board. And he's going to tell my father if he didn't come back to work, he's going to be drafted into the Army. But he was not eligible because he had a wife and 2 kids. And they weren't drafting those guys like that. But they didn't care about that. So I think my father only went back when we went to my mother's funeral.
Okay, can we pause for just a second? We're rolling again.
All right, Bill, let's pick up again with the move out of Louisiana. Your father decided he couldn't stay there. This is right at the beginning of World War II, and he moved first to Detroit, and then from there to Oakland, and he sent for the family from Oakland. Is that right? How did that occur?
Well, if you've ever been to Detroit in the wintertime, he said that was killing him. It was too cold. So he moved to Oakland, California, and went to work in shipyards. And he worked in shipyards until the war was over. And then they closed the shipyards. They stopped everything. So he got an idea. He bought himself a truck and started going out to the valley, which was 45 an hour away, and started talking to the farmers about getting fruit pickers. And he made quite a business out of it. And so from the time after we went back from my mother's funeral until I got to college, I always bought my school clothes picking fruit. And I was so proud of how much money I could make. It wasn't any money, but it was some money what I could make. And so then I enrolled in the university. You know what's really funny about that? When I was in Louisiana, my mother kept me away from white people as much as she could. And she kept white people away from me. Because she said, you don't know what they'll do. Okay? And so, when I first went to California, I went to school with some white kids. But then by the time I got to high school, it was an all-black school, except for the faculty. And then I went to university, and there were 9 black kids on the campus of the whole student body. And so I was back into that, and you might say cultural shock. But I had a pretty good career, and I was self-taught how to play. And the reason I say that is I got cut from the junior varsity in the 11th grade. And so while I was absorbing this, the varsity coach, who had been my homeroom teacher in junior high school, says to me, "I'm glad you got cut." "Why are you glad?" He says, "Because today you can come out for the varsity." I said, "I just got cut from junior varsity." He says, I'm not the junior varsity coach, I'm the varsity coach. So I'm on the varsity. And he says, "I want you to wait up to practice, the first practice." I said, what? He says, "Let's go." He got his car and drove us to the boys' club. And then he took $2 out of his pocket and bought me a year's membership. And said, "I want you, after practice here, I want you to go to the boys' club and play basketball every day." And so that's what I did, and that's where I learned to play. And so I had the good fortune of not being influenced by a coach. And so, could you hold up for a second?
Sure.
University, all of the cliche things that a college basketball player does, I didn't do any of them. So they figured I couldn't play. So during my whole freshman year, they considered that a waste of a scholarship. And so my sophomore year, they did not renew my scholarship. But the coach, I guess feeling guilty, he went to the dean of College of Business Administration and found an unused scholarship. So I played my sophomore year on an academic scholarship. And so my career, my sophomore year, there were a couple of things that made it interesting. Four of the top 6 players on the varsity my sophomore year told the coach that they did not appreciate him making them have to play with black guys. Now, he never told me that until I had retired from the Celtics. But I know I didn't get along with these guys. And a lot of things happened. I just said this is part of life. And my first varsity game set the tone of my relationship with the coach. We played Cal Berkeley, and the center was a preseason All-American. The game starts, and the first 5 shots he took, I blocked. And nobody in the building had ever seen anything like that. So they called timeout to discuss it, what it was I was doing, because they didn't know what I was doing. So we get in our huddle, and my coach says, "You can't play defense like that." "What? I just stopped him 5 times in a row. That's not the way to play defense." So he showed me on the sidelines there how he wanted me to play defense. So I go back out and I tried, and the guy shoots layups 3 times in a row. And I said, "This does not make sense." So I went back to playing the way I knew how. He was really insulted by that. He was trying to help me, and I was hard-headed and stubborn, and didn't know what I was doing, and he was trying to help me to figure out what I was doing, and I rejected. So he never liked me as a player from then on.
We're talking about the beginning of your basketball career at the University of San Francisco,
Right.
52 to 56. Basketball was taught differently then. I mean, some of the things that people now wouldn't be familiar with is that you weren't supposed to leave your feet. And
Yeah, no good defensive player ever leaves his feet.
right.
Well, basically what I was doing, in retrospect, was bringing the vertical game to a game that had been horizontal. And this is an altogether new element. See, in high jump, which I had participated in track and field, I could jump over my head. Well, in basketball in the gym, we should do an exercise where we take chalk and put it on your finger and run and jump as high and put a chalk mark. Well, I can put a chalk mark 13 feet above the floor, which is the height, the top of the backboard. And that was going to waste. So for 3 years, this coach did not like me. But I made up my mind that I was going to see how good I could be. So I really worked at developing the game, and part of my game was logistics. And so I learned how to cover great distances in a short period of time. And so I developed how to play. Well, he never agreed with that. Although my junior and senior year, we won 55 straight games, which is not bad. It was a record at the time, and we also won back-to-back Final Fours. And I set a record that still stands today in 2013. I had 27 rebounds in the championship game. And that's still a record. And I had 50 rebounds in the two games, the semifinals and the finals, which is still a record. But my coach was kind of a purist. This is the way the game is supposed to be played. And I wasn't doing that.
Some of this you once said that even before you got to the University of San Francisco that a lot of your skills in basketball came from mental games that you
Yes.
did from drawing. That you had drawn out of the library and that imagining things in art on a trip into the Northwest. How did
At that time, I had the ability to use my imagination. And so I went on this trip with these really first-class basketball players. And I watched them do everything. And I watched the total person, the footwork, head fakes, whatever, dribbling, the whole thing. And the next day, like a shoot-around, I would try to do these things. And so, as I told one of the guys in Oakland, he says, "What about San Francisco?" I said, "Well, the best way to explain it is I was already where I was going to be when I got there. You know, and I told you about when we first moved into the projects, and my mother was getting the apartment together, and I was sitting on the steps, staying out of the way, and these 5 guys ran by, and one of them slept as they went by. Well, I was 9 years old. And I did what 9-year-olds are supposed to do. I went and told my mother. And she said, "What?" She grabbed the keys to the house and grabbed me, and we went all through the projects looking for those 5 guys. And so she says, "These are the guys?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I didn't know what she was going to do. I thought she's going to take care of me. But the way she took care of me was, "Okay, you're going to fight every one of them, all 5 of them one at a time." Thanks, Mom. So I go into 5 fights, and I lose 3 and win 2. And so we're going back to our place, and I'm crying, and she says, "Don't cry. You did what you're supposed to do. Doesn't matter whether you won or lost. The matter is you stood up for yourself. And that's what you must always do. Stand up for yourself." And so that day changed my whole attitude about, she says, "I don't want you to ever pick a fight. But always finish the fight that you're in." And so that's the kind of stuff I got from my mother. My father, the roles almost reversed. She taught me to be a tough fighter, and he told me to be philosophical.
Well, he was philosophical.
Yes, he was. You know, Greg Taylor, I'll tell you how my father was. He would never take anything from me. I was making a lot of money. He would never take anything. He said his attitude was, "I got my own money. I don't need yours." So for his birthday one year, I went to a local automobile dealer and bought a car. And told the salesman, "I want you to take this car and deliver it to this address. And don't say anything, just when the man comes to the door, have the keys and say, 'That's your car,' and leave. No explanation." So I called him up and I said, "Did you get your car?" He said, "Yes." I just can't believe anybody do something that nice for me. I said, "Well, it's okay." So a week later, he calls me up. I said, "Okay, how you doing?" He said, "I ought to kick your ass." "What? What did I do?" He says, "I just got my first speeding ticket."
At San Francisco, I think you once said 1956 was a pretty amazing year in sports. That's your senior year, and you were not only in the NCAA Final Four for the 2nd year in a row winning it, but you also went to the Olympics and straight into the NBA.
Right. Well, we won the Final Four.
Who did you beat? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, we beat Iowa. Nice bunch of men, too. You know, you play against guys, and the guys at Iowa were first-class bunch of guys. You know, in fact, for years I kept up with them long after we played against each other. In fact, my counterpart, Bill Logan, who's a center, was the head of the Iowa Bankers Association. Years later, I went and speak to one of their conventions. Well, anyway, I was on the Olympic team. And in the gold medal game, we beat the Soviet Union by 35 points. We were kind of mean guys. See, in the tournament, we played a team from Thailand, okay? Their center is 5'10". And so you would say, well, these guys are no competition, let's just walk through it. No. Let's find out how bad we can beat these guys. We were going to try to beat them by 100 points. I don't think we got maybe to 80, 85. But I had a lot of fun. So after the Olympics, I went home, got married, and then went to Boston. And I had not talked to the Celtics before that. I was really an amateur, and I got there, and we had an idea of what was going to be. It took about half an hour to work that out, and so it is 13 months. The Final Four, the Olympic gold, and my rookie year we won the NBA. So we were in the college championship, the World Amateur Championships, and the Professional Championship in 13 months. And that's a pretty good run.
Is it true that when you went to Boston that Walter Brown, the owner of the Celtics, and Red Auerbach and Bill Sharman met you at the airport?
Well, I think Red was on the road.
Oh.
But Bill Sharman, no, it was all three of them, you're right. Red, Walter Brown, and
Bill Sharman.
Bill Sharman. Now, Walter Brown was one of the most marvelous people I've ever encountered.
The owner of the Celtics.
Yes. See, there were things that the Celtics did that I don't think are common knowledge. The first black player drafted in the NBA was a guy named Chuck Cooper from Duquesne. The Celtics drafted him. And at the draft, one of the other owners said to Walter Brown, "You know he's colored." And Walter Brown said, "I don't care if he's polka dot. That's who we drafted." Okay, fast forward. The Celtics were the first NBA team to start 5 black guys. It was an accident, and I'll show you how the Celtics were. We had been doing it for over a week and didn't know it until we read about it in the paper. See, Tommy Hudson was one of the forwards, and he got injured. And so his substitute went in and filled in until Hudson got back. And so he had 5 black guys start. And like I said, we didn't know about it until we read the paper. Because these are the guys that are on rotation, you know. And so now you got first black guy signed, the first 5 black guys starting. We had a guy named Sam Jones from North Carolina College, one of the, quote, traditional Negro colleges. Well, we drafted Sam in the first round. That was the first time in any sport that a guy from one of the Negro colleges was drafted in the first round. You see, the difference is, if you draft in the first round, you're on the team, you have to play your way off. If you drafted in the second round, you got to make the team. And so your compensation is different. So Sam was our first pick. It turned out to be a great, great pick. And then the Celtics were the first team to hire a black coach.
You?
Yeah. And the way that happened was Auerbach says to me, "I'm retiring. And I'll have to pick the next coach. And I will not hire anybody that you do not approve of 100%. So he says, what we're going to do is we're going to you make a list and I'll make a list of 5 guys that'd be okay with you, and I'll have 5 guys okay with me. And whoever's on both lists is just who'll get the job. Well, there was nobody on both lists. And so Red says, well, I'm going to hire this one guy. I says, Red, if you hire him, I will retire with you. What's the matter? Don't you think he's a good coach? I said, it make a difference. I don't even want to be in the same room with him. So he said, well, what am I going to do? Well, going back, he had offered me the job first. And I said, Red, I watched the stuff you went through. No way. And so he said, well, what am I going to do? I said, okay, I'll take it. I said, here's the deal, though, Red. I'll take the job. If it doesn't work, we'll know after by the All-Star game. And if we agree it's not working, you can hire anybody you want, and I guarantee to give them 100% cooperation. But we never got to that.
So that was the deal.
Yes.
That's 1966, right? You're the first
Yes.
black, not only a coach, but a player coach. What is that? Had there been other player coaches in the NBA?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
You know,
And no assistant coaches. I mean, people today must be shocked. There are so many, I don't know how many assistant coaches there are.
well, Red says, do you want an assistant? I said, no. He said, why not? I said, okay, Red, give me one of your assistants. Well, Red had never had an assistant. Okay. So I asked him, why don't you have an assistant? He said, that's just another guy you have to coach. And the atmosphere in Boston would have been detrimental to the situation, I thought, if I had an assistant coach. Because half a season into it, they said, well, that guy's doing all the coaching. Russell's just a figurehead. No matter what. Well, if I was going to coach, I wanted to be the coach. Okay? And so that's the way I was doing it. And it's very interesting that Red's last year as a coach, he got thrown out of 22 games, including the All-Star game. And so as a captain, I had to take the rest of the game. So I went in with some experience on how to do it. And we had, as a captain, we used to play gin rummy at night after games because neither one of us could sleep after a game. And we talk about coaching philosophy. And what he wanted to do was set up a system, make sure that everybody knows it, and they get the hell out the way. And that was the way he coached. And that's the way he got the team together. Because I trusted him completely. And he used to do some things that I'd asked him about. For example, I played for Boston for 13 seasons. And during that 13 seasons, we only made one trade. And we picked some guys up after they retired, and we give them another year. But he never said to anybody, the way you played there, you got to play different here. I got you here because of the way you played there. So I don't want you to change. That's the way I want you to play. And so guys did not have to, quote, to play for the Celtics, did not have to learn a new way of playing. He got you there for where you were before you got here. And he had a place for you in that system.
Why did he get thrown out of so many games?
Pause for a second.
Oh.
We're back.
Why did Red Auerbach get thrown out of so many games? Did it serve a purpose, or was it just his personality?
A combination. He was never going to sit on the sideline and say, what the heck? He says, my team, I can't get my team to fight for me if I won't fight for them. In fact, my first game, referee called goaltending, which was not goaltending. Red went nuts. He got to yell and scream and stomped until the referee called a technical on him. And, but they were careful after that when they called goaltending. That was his purpose. And after the game, I said to Red, you're the first coach since high school that looked out for me. He says, I can't expect my players to fight for me if I won't fight for them. That's just the way I coach. It wasn't you. Thanks, Red.
Could you talk a little bit? You played on storied Celtic teams. You won 11 championships in 13 years. Just a little bit of personality sketches of the various players on the team, like Sam Jones, and what they were like.
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, more important to me than winning 11 championships, we won 8 in a row. That is difficult. Of course, you got to do the same things without repeating yourself, which takes some planning. Well, I played with some guys that we had a family. I liked all the guys except for 2, and they will never know who they were. And these 2 I was ambivalent about, Bill Sharman, most thoughtful player ever played with. He did everything by the numbers and would fight at the drop of a hat and was always throwing sombreros around. I think Sharman led the league in fights. Cousy could not fight, okay? So one of the things Red did was very interesting. We used to play at Syracuse, and their guards used to beat up Cousy. Just beat him up. Okay, that's a foul. But we're going to still beat him up. So Red got so incensed about that. So one night he says, okay, we had a guy named Jungle Jim Luskatoff. Big, looked like he'd been lifting weights and all that. He says, Lusky, listen, I want you to watch. The first guy that hits Cousy, I want you to turn around and knock the hell out of Dolph Shays. Shays was their best player, and he played forward. So over here, this guy hits Cousy, whack! And Shays is saying, what the hell is going on? Why'd you hit me? In fact, the next time we played there, all the fans had cardboard hatchets. It said Luskatoff was a hatchet man. But what they hadn't noticed was every time the guy hit Cousy, that was a clue for Luskatoff to hit Shays. And so they figured out that maybe we shouldn't be beating up on Cousy. And so Red always had a purpose for everything he did. And
Cousy was the star of the Celtics when you arrived.
Yes.
Right? How did the 2 of you get along?
Perfect. There was never any negative exchange between the 2 of us. In fact, I took the attitude. I don't know if it was proper, but Coos was not a stalwart on defense. Okay? How's that? Is that okay?
Gentle.
Yeah, okay. But I never complained to him or to anybody. I looked at the situation and I talked to Coos about it. And I says, well, when this guy comes up and you guard him, make him go left if he's right-handed. And as soon as he gets past you, run to the center. So I don't want him to be able to throw a bounce pass to the center because he can't throw it over the top because I won't let him. Okay? So now, Coos intercepted a lot of passes because they tried to throw a bounce pass and he was in the lane. And so I used to lead the league way lead in block shots. Well, a great majority of them were on Cousie's man. And we turned that, and then he and I would talk, and one day he says to me, you know, on the rebounds and block shots, you come on the ball, you're looking for me. When the shot's taken, I'll run over to this spot over here. It's halfway between the free throw line and the half court on the left side. And so if we're on the road, I look for the green. Then out of the corner of my eye, I didn't have to turn around and look. I could catch the ball, catch the rebound, and just change direction. He would take 2 dribbles and we'd have a layup. And so I felt, see, my whole thing was I found out that in order to get any recognition, I would have to change my complexion. And so what I decided to do, and I was in college also, tried to win every game. And so when my career's over, they said, so-and-so's better, he's better, he's better. In fact, my second year in the league, the players, in those days, we had to vote for the MVP. You could not vote for your own team, but you could vote for anybody you wanted. Well, I was overwhelming MVP. It wasn't even close. The writers, or the media, whatever you call it, picked me second team all league. So I think I'm still the only guy that ever got the MVP and be second team all league. And so I wasn't going to let that bother me. Because my emphasis was on winning on a team game.
Why did Cousy never referred to Red Auerbach as Red? Is that right? He had eccentricities.
Yeah, what did he call him? Arnold.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Well, you know, it started out a kind of a shaky relationship, but evolved into a good relationship. When Cousy was a senior at Holy Cross, Red when it came to his pick, he did not pick Cousy. Because Red's theory about winning was put a team together that can play against the best team. And the rest of it will take care of itself, which is solid, I think. Well, the dominant player was a guy named George McCann. Incidentally, one of the great guys that ever played in the NBA. So there was a kid, a big guy from Bowling Green, could match McCann physically, and he had some skills. So Red drafted him. And I asked Red, well, what happened? He says, well, the press in Boston tried to crucify Red because they said how stupid he was not to draft Cousy. But everybody knew he was the best player in the world. So Red said, well, that's the way I want it. That's the way I think I should do it. Well, the guy says, well, we're going to run you out of town. You've insulted all of us. And besides that, you're a Jew, and we don't like Jews either. So I asked Red, how'd you handle that? He says, I'll just outlive the bastards.
So he had some of Mr. Charlie's advice, or your mother's advice. That's their little red wagon.
How's that?
That's their little red wagon. If
Oh,
they're
yes.
upset about it.
Oh, yeah, that's, see, Red knew what he's doing. I don't know if most people know this. Red used to practice with us. He was a decent shooter, and we had a game, we played 21, and he'd be out there with us all the time. See, he played college ball. In fact, my first tournament in college was the all-college tournament in Oklahoma City. And very interesting. The coach of Wichita, who was, it was 8 teams. We were seated 8th, and Wichita was seated 1. So what they do to you, if you're seated 8th, they throw you to the Wolves. You have to play the top seed team the first game. So it's like a warm-up for them, okay? So the coach says he never heard of the USF. He thought it was San Francisco State. Well, when we got ready for the tournament, he found out it was USF. So he sent his brother out to scout us. Well, he picked the last game we lost in college to scout us, UCLA at Westwood. So he says, guys, I don't know anything about these guys. This is just before the game. He said, I don't know anything about these guys, but my brother scouted them, and he's going to give you a quick rundown. So his brother said, well, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but these guys cannot play a lick. In fact, most of the good high school teams in the state of Kansas can beat these guys. They got 2 guards. We changed one of the guards since the last game that we lost. And so the 2 guards can't put the ball in the ocean. Well, one of those guards was a guy named Casey Jones, who was a fair player. He said, they got this tall colored kid that plays center. He does not do anything. And they never passing the ball. In our system, they never had a play for me to shoot. So all he does is stand around, and he jumps a lot. Sometimes for no reason, he just stand there and jump. And so don't worry about it. Just go out and just run about the gym, and then the subs can play the rest of the game. I don't think that coach can play you started over 15 minutes. So the game starts. 3 minutes into the game, they call timeout. The score is 25-3. They couldn't, first of all, Case and Perry, full court press, they couldn't get the ball over half court. And when they got over half court, they threw up a shot, I'd block it, and they'd shoot layups. And so it was a disaster for them. Halftime, we were 30 points ahead. And then the next game, we played Oklahoma City University, and we only beat them by 19. And so the championship game, we played George Washington. That's where Red went to college. And he played for, his coach was still coaching. And so, started second half, we outscored them 22-1. And so, after the game, Ron Hart, Red's old coach, college coach, called Red up at midnight. Hey, Red, I just saw something. I just saw the player. This is the one you want to get for the Celtics. Now, he's a junior. So you got 2 years to figure out how to get him for your team. And so that's when Red started to work on getting me to Boston.
Can we pause for a second? We're back.
You know, it's amazing to me, you're talking about games over nearly 60 years ago. Do you think any athlete at the level you played remembers these? They're still vivid to you?
Well, you know, I'll tell you what, my late wife was always trying to do something for me. And so I bought her, both of us got computers at the same time. And she had her computer, I had my computer. And so, and learned her computer, she started going on eBay and see if there's anything on there. So one day she says, I got something for you. What's that? It's a basketball game, University of San Francisco, 1955. And I think you in college then, and played at the University of San Francisco. So we have a video of it, a tape. So we sat down and turned it on. And I said, oh, that's Oregon State at USF. She said, how'd you know? I said, I just saw that introduction. And I told her, truthfully, every play before it happened for the whole game. And she said, now how do you remember that? That was 40 or 50 years ago. I said, there was a time before I tried to consciously stop doing it. I remembered every play of every game I ever played. I did that for scouting purposes, so that if I play this guy again, I know exactly what he does. See, because my defense was not reaction, it was action. You come up to me, Taylor, and you're a player, and you have a shot you want, I don't know. I'm gonna make you take the shot I want you to take. And then I play that.
That's a remarkable way your brain works, though. I mean, the only thing that I know that's comparable to it is friends of mine who can remember the lyrics of every music, you know, because that's an emotional tie. Their head is stuffed with lyrics from music from their childhood, but you can remember plays over a long career like that. It's really
Even now, I've tried constantly to forget most of them. I remember plays that I did in high school. The game that I got the scholarship from, we were playing Oakland High at Oakland High. And I had 1, 3, and 5 leading scorers in the conference on my team. So there was not much left over. Okay? So we had a close game. In the first half, I scored the last 3 baskets of the first half. So we went into the second half up by 1 point. We get down to the last few minutes, and I scored the last 4 baskets for my team. And we won by 1 point, I think it was. Well, I remember every one of those plays. And they were all hustle plays, get them offensive rebounds. But mostly for scouting for me, because I was never going to be reacting the second time I played against you. The first time you might do a move and, hey, okay, don't do it again.
At McClymonds, just for historical purposes, at McClymonds, your high school, you were there at the same time Frank Robinson, the baseball player, was. Did you know him? Is that?
Yeah, oh, of course. Frank, in fact, Frank, today, if I run to Frank, he'll tell me, you know, I was a better basketball player than you at McClymonds. What's remarkable about Frank, he's a really good guy. And my coach in high school was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was the only white guy that would let the black kids play on his American Legion team. And so at one time he had 13 guys in the major leagues. And Frank was one of them, Vader Penson, and more, just as important, a guy named Kurt Flood. These guys, and I'll tell you the truth, when we were in high school, Frank was a great player, but all we ever heard about was a guy named J.W. Porter. He played for Oakland Tech, a big red-headed guy. And according to the local press, J.W. could walk on water without getting his ankles wet. But Frank, you know, he might have been all city, but J.W. was the man. Well, I'll tell you a story about Frank, if you don't mind. We're in a golf tournament down in San Diego. Sitting to my right is Frank Robinson. Sitting to my left, Bob Gibson, a Hall of Fame pitcher. So I brought up a conversation. I said, Frank, don't you hold a record for the most hit by a pitcher in the major leagues? He said, yeah. I said, who hit you the most? So Bob Gibson was one of the few college guys in the major leagues when he was in the major league. You know, he went to Creighton. So Bob is embarrassed by this, sincerely embarrassed. So he says to me, Bill, let me tell you, I did not want to hit him all those times. He said, but Frank put his left elbow over the plate. So he took away the inside pitch. You couldn't throw inside because he was up over the plate. If you threw an inside pitch, you'd hit him. So he says, one day I decided I'm just not going to hit him anymore. I'm just not going to do that. So I threw a pitch on the outside. We never did fire that baseball. He said, well, I guess I'll have to hit him.
At USF, was it at USF you also high jumped with Johnny Mathis, the singer?
Well, Taylor, you got it backwards.
I got it back. He high jumped with you.
Aha!
All right.
No, I was just kidding.
Yeah.
No, he's been a friend for at least, it seems like at least 60 years. And he was a good high jumper. I was in the top 5 in the world, including my freshman year. And I went to a track meet up at University of Nevada, Reno. And I set the field record in high jump. It lasted 3 weeks. Johnny Mathis went up there and broke it. And I never forgave him for that either. But he was, he played, he's a good basketball player. So we had a summer league, and he played at it. So we had an awards dinner, okay? So all the guys in the league were at this dinner. And so for the entertainment at the dinner, the MC said, we're going to have one of our participants sing a song for us. Oh boy. No one knows any basketball player that could sing. Okay. So he gets up a cappella and sings Strange in Paradise. After the song, dead silence. Nobody in the place could believe what we just heard. He was so good, and nobody even suspected he could sing. And so none of us were ever surprised when he went on to this great career.
He has had a great career since. Let's cover just a few of the other Celtics that you played with to do personality sketches of. I know you talked about Sam Jones a little bit, but I think I remember you were saying that he could be exasperating because on the one hand he was a great leader, on the other hand you would tell him to call the plays and he would say, I don't call the plays. So,
well, it started out when Sam was a rookie. In practice, Sam was as good a player as I'd ever seen. Okay? So on the way home, I let him, because the way this salary structure was, you didn't get paid until the season started. So all through training camp, all you got was meal money. So I brought Sam home with me, and they stayed with me until he started getting paid. Okay? So all the way home after practice, I said, Sam, you can really play. He said, I know it. So I said, why don't you play like that all the time? You could be first team all league. You could make a lot of money. He said, I don't want to do that. I said, why not? I do not want to have to play like that every night. He says, that'll wear you out as much as playing. The responsibility of it, that if you don't play well, the team not doing well. I said, okay, Sam, I can live with that. And so Sam could have been one of the all-time greats if he had wanted to. He already was great, I thought. Because in our run of, he was on 10 championship teams. He was never an innocent bystander. And at least 6 times that I can recall, Sam took the shot that meant the season. And he never hesitated to take the shot, and he never missed. Now, a couple of other guys were, like Tom Heinsohn. Everybody thought of him as a big, gruff, hard-nosed guy. Tommy was an artist and a poet. He said, Heinsohn, a poet? And one of the all-time, for me, one of the all-time good guys. Okay? And one of my teammates, one of my favorite teammates.
you said that Red had to motivate him differently than he motivated you, right?
Well, Red had a system he'd figure out. Part of his strategy was, how many minutes can you play in a row and be effective? And so he'd start Heinsohn, at the end of 6 minutes, he'd take him out. And no matter how he's playing. And so Heinsohn said that great public statement, Red, you hold me up to public scorn. And Red says, "To hell with it." He said, "Why you take him out after 6 minutes? If he's playing good, he's tired. If he's not playing good, if he's not tired, he ain't playing good." So at 6 minutes, get him out of there. And so Heinz considered Red using him as a whipping boy. And there was some justification for feeling that way. But Red actually really cared for the players.
What about Ramsey?
Now,
You haven't mentioned
Ramsey,
Frank Ramsey.
we got along from the first moment we met. And because Frank and I were only interested, we're both only interested in one thing: winning. And that's his whole thing. Now, Red used I call it almost a sack job, but Frank is too smart to use a sack job. Frank, when he got there, he had been in the Army. And he got there, he was playing with us on weekend passes. So we was always coming off the bench. And so next year, Frank is coming off the bench. And Red talks to him and says, "Now, you should be a starter. And I will never refer to you as second team. I will call you my sixth starter. And you will always be my first substitute." Well, that took care of, all of us had egos, and all of us wanted to be started or whatever. So Frank bought it. So Frank personified sixth man. In fact, they named an award in the NBA after what Frank started. And I'll never forget one night I got one of my front teeth knocked out. I never had anything like that happen. So I look at this, one of my front teeth in my hand. And I don't know what to do. So I said to Frank, "Look at that." And Frank took out his bridge, where was both his front teeth. He said, "Here, Russ, look at that."
He was from Kentucky, right?
Yes, and you know what's really funny was, his coach had said they shouldn't let these black guys play, or the Jews either. And coming from that atmosphere, Frank and I never discussed it. We were teammates with this idea we both win, and both us showed the other guy complete and total respect. And I'll never forget, after one of our championships, Frank says, "Hey, Russ, after the season's over, why don't you come down and spend a week with me down in Kentucky?" I said, "Frank, you're a good guy. There's no way in hell I'm going to go spend a week in Kentucky."
How about Havlicek? He took that sixth man role from Ramsey, right?
Yeah, Frank showed him how to do it.
Uh-huh.
And as Havlicek had played in college, you always hit the open man. Well, in pro ball, you set up so the best shooter gets the shots, And so we give Havlicek the ball, and nobody even in 10 feet, and he's looking for somebody to pass to. Havlicek, shoot the ball. Okay. So this goes on for a while. So one night he took us up, shot 38 times. So to show you the kind of guys we were, what kind of team we had, we get the trainer to leave the bench early and go to the locker room and fill the tub with ice. And so when we came out of the game, after the game, we all iced down Havlicek's arm.
Because he had shot so, yeah.
Well, you know, we all had something that we did well. And we always tried to put our teammates in a position to do what they did well. So that every play consists of 5 guys doing something. And so that when you got an open shot, because we all worked to get you an open shot. And that was part of our thing. And it's like we almost developed what we call the Celtic way. Is that the attitude was be kind to your teammates. Now, what does that sound like in pro ball? Well, what do you mean by be kind? Well, first of all, what is kindness? Kindness is an act of strength. I can do this, and I will do that. Okay? That's strength and kindness. Okay? So, like Satch was guarding Bill Bradley one night in Madison Square Garden. And Bradley was shooting him out the gym. I mean, he was good moving without the ball. So I says to Satch, hey, Satch, this is the time when I said, there's something you ought to know. On the Knickerbocker uniforms, there's a small number in front and a big number on the back. I know you haven't seen that small number. But there is one. So, the story happened. Bill Bradley told me about it. That same game. Bradley's having a good night. So we lined up for free throws. Me and Willis on that side. Satch and Bradley on the other side. I was a captain, so I called timeout. I walk across the lane. Now, I don't know if this language is okay for your thing, is.
I think it'll be all right.
So I walk over to Satch. And Bradley, who told me the story later, because I pointed to Bradley, I says, can you guard that motherfucker? Now that shocked Bradley. He'd never been called that before. That was the idea. Satch said, yeah. I said, well, guard him, God damn it. And went back across the lane. And Bill Bradley told me the story later. He said he never hit another shot. He said because I had thrown him off, you know. And that was the idea of we should try all kind of weird things to get.
So your comment was aimed at Bradley, not
Oh,
so much
yeah.
at Satch.
Right. I was looking at Satch, but it was aimed at Bradley.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you pause for a second?
Sure.
We're rolling again.
I'd like to shift a little bit to talking about race themes. You've talked about them a little bit growing up. That your mom didn't want you around white folks, and that when you went to USF for the first time, you were in a sea of white folks
Right.
and Jesuits to boot on a Jesuit campus. there at San Francisco. But obviously, you've dealt with race your whole life. A lot of the talk that you've, when we've discussed it, had been basically about perspective and how people see things and what people are not conscious of. If I'm not mistaken, you said that the first time you went to the movies and you saw King Kong, the movie, you
Yeah.
came out of there with a different perspective than anybody else in the theater.
Yeah, I think so. I look at this big old gorilla, okay? And he's been taking these sacrifices, obviously for years and years. The first time they put a white woman out there, he fell in love with her. Now, I just thought that was odd.
But most people didn't. Most people saw that as the romance of the film. You said that often he'd had sacrifices and of African women, that he would come and take them and kill them and probably eat them. But the first time he puts a white woman out there, he falls in love with his food.
Yeah.
So it's just how people look at things and what people take for granted. You said, was it your high school coach that said you can't fight on the basketball court because if black kids fight, it's a riot, and if white
Yes.
kids fight, it's a scuffle?
Yeah, this is the same guy that my high school coach, he says, let's keep things in perspective. No fighting. It's not because I'm afraid that you're afraid. I don't think that at all. But if we get into 3 fights, we are a bunch of thugs. And you know, no matter how well we play, just those thugs from the climbers. Well, so when they find out how good you are, there'll be guys that will try to pick a fight. Because that's the only way they think they can compete. Well, when they try to pick a fight, you don't fight, you play harder. And you beat them with a game of basketball.
That you have to play harder
Yeah.
because in effect the
Yes.
race, you have to make up for that.
Yeah. Well, I know when I was a rookie with the Celtics, none of the guys in the league had ever seen me play because I played on the West Coast. And so this guy I played against told me this story years later. He was the center for the Fort Wayne Pistons, then before it was Detroit. And we started the game, he'd never seen me play. And the first 5 shots he took, I blocked him. Well, his coach had been a referee, had a real scratchy voice, and you could hear him all over the gym. And he says, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, let that rookie embarrass you like that. Damn rookie, look at him, he's making you look bad. You embarrassed all of us. And so this guy's listening to this for about 5 minutes. And he says, now I got to get out of this. What am I going to do? Okay. I know that he will fight. Okay. So I'm going to hit him. We go get in a fight, we'll both get thrown out of the game for fighting. There were a couple things he did not know. I would never fight in the first quarter. We get to the last quarter now, we can talk about it. Okay? So he just turned around and hit me in the chest. Whack! Knocked my breath out of me. And so I just looked at him. And I didn't say a word because I used to never talk. And so what he did not know, that between high school and college, I had worked in the shipyards, San Francisco Naval Shipyard. And we had a lunchtime volleyball competition. And so I learned how to spike the ball. You know, we passed on spike it. So the next time he shot, I spiked it right at his head. That's no foul. That's competition. The next 3 times he shot, the third time he shot and ducked.
Speaking of race in basketball, and I want to transition after the break to talk a little bit about your time in Boston. The Celtics, as you said earlier, were the first team in the NBA to draft a black player. They were also, Boston, the Red Sox, were the last baseball team to take a black player. Not until 12 years after Jackie Robinson did they get Pumpsie Green. So when you were in Boston, it was a city that was just its 2 sports teams were the first and last on that.
Yeah.
How racial? How did you learn about race in Boston?
Well, it didn't take very long. Like that long after I got there, they started having problems with the busing and all that kind of stuff. And they were very negative about it. And like a couple of the sports writers told Heinsohn that they would never vote for me for anything. Okay? I'll give you an example. 1969. We won our second championship in a row. Okay? They had a parade on Friday afternoon. Friday morning, a reporter from the Boston Herald walked into Red's office and said, "Are you satisfied with the coaching you had this year?" Red said, "What the hell are you talking about? We just won a championship." He said, "Yeah, but if you'd had a better coach, couldn't you have won more regular season games?" All it was, they did not want Bill Russell or any black guy coaching their Celtics, which finally had become theirs. And Red says to me, calls me up after the guy leaves. He says, "Do you believe this?" I said, "Red, it doesn't make any difference. I'm not going to do that stuff anymore anyway." That's how I announced I was retiring. And the reason I never said anything about retiring before, there had been a tradition with the Celtics. The guys announced before their last season, before the season starts, that this is going to be their last year. Well, Sam Jones had announced that this is going to be his last year. There's no way I was going to ever rain on Sam's parade and say, "Well, I'm retired too." No, that's not. You can't do that. Not to a player I held in such high esteem as Sam Jones. Mm-hmm. So Red says to me, "Don't tell anybody, because I got to try to change your mind." Tell you how respectful Red was. He never, ever mentioned that again. And because when he decided to retire as a coach, I said, "Red, why don't you coach one more year and I can retire with you?" He says, "No, I've had it. This is it." And I never brought that up again. Because I respect that he was an intelligent, thoughtful man. And if he decided to do that, all you could do is say, "It's been great fun, Red." That's all you could do. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing he said with me. In fact, tell you how the Celtics were to me. I call them my Celtics. That's Walter Brown and Red Auerbach. In the middle 60s, Walter Brown called me up and says, I need to talk to you. Okay. When you want to do it? He says, well, when can you get in here? I said, well, Walt, I don't have a job. I can come in right now. He says, I'll wait for you. So I go into Walter Brown's office, and he's sitting there with his desk is full of papers and stuff. He says, see these papers? I say, yeah, not very neat. He says, those are the papers of the Boston Celtics. Those are the books for the Boston Celtics. And the reason I'm showing them to you is I want you to go through them. We don't pay you enough. You know it, I know it, and anybody that's interested knows that we don't pay you enough. But I'm already paying you more than I can afford because we're losing money. But I want you to know that we know that you're underpaid. And we can afford to pay you more now. But as soon as if we make enough money that we can, I'll make it up to you. And he says, because you never held us up. You could have held us up, but you didn't. And I want you to know that I appreciate it. As a consequence, after Walter died, my last contract with the Celtics, Red gave me an 8-year, no-cut contract at 35. That means I could play for the Celtics if I wanted to until I was 43. But in order to collect it, I did not have to play. I could bring my doctor in and say, I want to play this year. But my doctor says he doesn't think I can do it. Then they got to pay me for that year. Now, I only played 1 year of that contract, and then I left. And they said, well, why did you take the money? I said, I could not take money that I did not earn. I got that from my father.
Yeah. Same reason he didn't want your money. You
Right.
Earn it. Yeah. All right, let's take a break. Is that all right?
Okay, we're going now.
Let's talk some about your philosophical views and also public life outside of sports. We're going to talk more about sports too. But from very early on, it seemed to me that you started thinking about how sports fit into other life. You used to say even that sports was a mixture of art and war, and that it was like politics, religion, and the arts, that sports could gather people. When did you start thinking philosophically about the place of sports in life?
Well, I think it, when my high school coach told us no fighting. Mm-hmm. You understand me? And you have to be aware. I think the key phrase to me has been, it is far more important to understand than it is to be understood. And so, take things as they come. It's like you walk into this room, and it is. Now, what's good or bad is your perception. Right or wrong is your perception. And after you make a judgment, the next question is, what are you going to do about it? Okay. So, now, if you lose control, you will end your life being a bitter, annoyed old man. But if you take control of your life as much as possible, because you understand, then you then have a chance to be happy. You know, because now, when I was in college, I found out that there were not any blacks that were top of their field, no matter what sport. Now, you take Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. If Willie Mays had hit 100 home runs in a season, Mickey Mantle still would have been the best baseball player. Now, Willie could get annoyed by that, or he just go out and say, well, next year I have to hit 200. And go, you know what I mean? And so, like, my junior year in college, I may have told you about it. We were 28-1. We won the Final Four. I was outstanding player in the Final Four. I was first team All-American. Averaged 20 points and 20 rebounds, and they never counted block shots until 4 or 5 years after I retired from the NBA. Okay? So, first team All-American. We go to Northern California sports banquet, and they picked another center's player of the year. Now, I could have been injured. But what I did, for me eternally, I dismissed that award as something that I would like. And I really was able to do that. And so I had made up my mind that I was going to be the best basketball player I could be. And this team, I have no regard for the coach or the rest of the players. All I thought about was being the best basketball player I could be. Well, I was very good and that made my team win. But I wasn't going to let my self-esteem be tied up on what others said about what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's like...
You said that the Celtics had more fun than any team around. Was that essential to winning, or was that an accident?
I think it was essential to winning. Because it may sound overblown, but we actually looked out for each other. And if a guy was having a bad night, we would counsel him. Always use humor.
Toughening humor, right? You made
Yeah.
fun of him.
Yeah.
You couldn't be thin-skinned and be a Celtic, right?
Right. Well, you know, I know if a guy's having a bad time and he's hurting our team, how can we help him out? Well, first of all, we could help him out physically. But let him know that mentally we were there for him. If he needed help, we'll give it to him. And he should not be ashamed to ask for help. You see, in the macho world, men are usually reluctant to ask for help. Well, one night we were playing the Philadelphia Sixers in Boston Garden. And I was doing my very best, and not that well, Garden Will Chamberlain. Okay. I do it, he do it, and everybody in the building do it. So I kept hearing this whop sound, whop, whop, whop. And what it was, Casey was trying to help me out. So every time he went by Wilt, he'd hit him. And so I looked back and Casey going by, whack, and hit me. I said, time out, time out. We go to the bench, and Red says, what's the matter? I said, Red, excuse me. Casey, what are you doing? He says, what's the matter? You afraid, big fella? I said, you goddamn right I am. I said, you go right and hit him. I got to wrestle with that big monster all night. Like, I said, now, it's hard enough, but you're going to get him riled up and make him easy, make him impossible. And so, it was Casey taking a chance to get into a fight to help me. Because he could see I needed help, you know, and it went all through the lineup that way.
When you were coming up into the pro sports, did you have any role models or athletes that you look up to at all, like Jackie Robinson? Or?
Well, Jackie, of course, in basketball was a guy named George Mikan.
The center for the Minneapolis Lakers?
Well, you know, when he started playing for DePaul, his folks thought he was going to seminary to be a priest. And so his father said to him one night, George, there's a guy with the same name as you playing for DePaul. And they were shocked that that was their son that was playing for DePaul. And you see, when I was a kid in Oakland, in elementary and junior high school especially, Oakland had a minor league baseball team, the Oakland Acorns, who played in Emeryville. Well, we used to go out there. We couldn't afford to go in the park. And we wait and see if anybody hit a home run. You could take that ball and go in and get in. And so, but we found that the worst creatures to ever invade the earth were minor league baseball players. They would come out of the games and they see us and they call us the N-word, spit tobacco at us, and act indecently. So my view of professional athletes was not positive at all. So when I went to an exhibition game, the Lakers were playing, and this guy that went to, he asked if I wanted, he played high school ball with Jim Pollard, who was a big star with the Lakers. And he said, want to go to the locker room? I said, no, I don't want to go there with those people. You know. And so I said, I'll wait out here. So he goes in there. And so while I was waiting, George Mikan comes out. He sees me and he walks over me. How you doing, big fella? Well, that was a real joke. Mikan was 6'10", 280, and I was 6'7", 100. And he says, how you doing, big fella? He said, you play center? I said, yeah. He said, well, he showed me a couple of moves that he used. And says, now listen, when you get out of college, you got to come play for the Lakers. Now, I couldn't even make my homeroom team. And college was, I had no scholarships or nothing. And so I'd been working at a shipyard to save enough money to go to college. I couldn't pay my own way. So Michael says, after you get out of college, you got to come play for the Lakers. And that was it. He was the number one guy in basketball. And he talked so nice to me. He wasn't condescending or anything. He was talking to me like I was another ball player.
Well, that's going back more than 50, 60 years or something like that. And we think race relations would have been horrible back then, and they were, because you've never been rosy about it. But you're saying that even back in those periods, there are always exceptions to the rule. This is a
Well,
really
you know,
decent white
remember
guy.
I told you his folks thought he was going to be in the seminary.
Yeah.
And but he was just a good person. And I tell you, one of the greatest rewards I had was after George died, they had a private ceremony for his family. And I was invited. Because George and I had been friends. You know, we had a thing in LA, we did a TV show or something, and George says, Bill, I want you to do me a big favor. I need a big favor from you. I'll understand if you said no. I said, what is it, George? He said, I want to introduce you to my son. Are you kidding? That's a favor? You know. So he introduced me to his son. And he says to his son, I want you to meet Bill Russell, the greatest center that ever played basketball. And I said, George, people forget, you know, he won 3 championships in 5 years. He was the man in basketball. But it wasn't on television and all that, so most people didn't know that. But I was so flattered that this man had been so nice to me. You know, a lot of people say very, very insensitive things to kids. And I hope that I never do that. You know, because you can injure kids. But not being this, well, I have this thing that how I get along. Let the first thing out of your mouth be your second thought.
Because the first one is the one that might injure a kid.
Yeah, or you knew.
Yeah. I think one of your sayings was always that you don't believe there's any such thing as other people's kids.
Right. Well, I was speaking at a school in Fort Worth, Texas, and they were winding down the Vietnam War, and I said instead of spending all that money killing peasants, we should take that money and repair our educational system because we haven't paid enough attention to it. And we haven't paid enough money to it. And so after the speech, one guy came to me and said, well, listen, your speech was all right except for one thing. What you talk about is raising my taxes. And why should I pay taxes to educate other people's kids? And I said to him, 2 reasons you should pay taxes. One, when you were 6 and your folks bottled you up and sent you off to school, there was a school there for you to go to. And your folks did not build it. It was there. And second, there are no other people's kids in the United States. That's the next generation of Americans. And if we don't educate them, we'll lose all the things that we think are important. Because if we're not one of the top educated societies, we will not be able to compete internationally And so we have a choice of either building our schools or picking a war. And I don't think picking a war is the best option.
Could you talk a little bit about your relationship to the civil rights movement? I know because that was during your playing career, it was around for a lot of it. I know once you went to Mississippi in the summer of 1964 for Charles Evers, the brother of Medgar Evers, a year after he was killed.
Well, I was never big on organizations. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that was if you say something as part of an organization, you can be dismissed as a mouthpiece for an organization. And so they don't have to deal with what you're saying. When Medgar Evers got shot, we had a memorial service for him in Boston, at the Boston Common. And I sat next to Charlie Evers, his brother. And so, I don't know what I was thinking. But I told him, there's ever anything I can do, here's my home number. He used it. So he called me that summer and says, we've taken a hit. Morale-wise. And we're down the lowest we've been. And so we need somebody to give us a boost. To show somebody from outside cares. So I said, okay, what do you want me to do? He says, well, what would be a good idea? Right in your field of expertise, why don't you do some clinics, basketball clinics in Jackson, Mississippi, and surrounding towns? Invite everybody. Any kid that wants to come can come to your clinics. I said, I can do that. So I went down and did clinics. And I actually enjoyed myself. And Charlie says to me, we're not going to let anything happen to you. I said, okay. And so I had armed guards. I'll tell you, but they were like the Secret Service. You never knew they were around. But that gave me such a high.
That was 1964. This is Mississippi Freedom Summer. Werner, Cheney, and Goodman, the first three civil rights workers on the very first night, were murdered. It was a frightful place to be going to.
Yes.
And you're not exactly inconspicuous.
Well, I was invited years later to the McDonald's High School All-Star Game, okay, in Indiana. And so I went there, and I had a good time. And after I spoke, they asked me to take a picture with each one of the participants, boys and girls. There was a boys' game and a girls' game. So the female high school player of the year was a young lady from Colorado. And so while they were setting the picture up, she says, Mr. Russell, I'd like to say something to you. You said something today in your speech that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. What? You said to us, do not be afraid. Because all decisions made out of fear are usually bad decisions. And you go into a new world from high school to college, into college into the world. Do not be afraid, because you're all right. You got this far. Do not be afraid. Well, I may be not too bright, but I cannot recall the last time I was afraid. And the society I live in, every time I can do something, I see it as an opportunity.
Could you tell me a little bit about your relationships with the other civil rights figures from that period? Did you ever meet Malcolm X or Martin Luther King?
Well, I just briefly knew Malcolm X. Okay, I know Louis Farrakhan. He's been to my house a few times because he came out with before he changed to Ali, he was Cassius Clay. And the reason Cassius was coming to my house was I was a gold medal winner in the '56 Olympics. And I always had affection for gold medal winners because I know what it takes, you know. And so I knew the March on Washington. I stayed in the same hotel as Reverend Martin Luther King. And so we met in the lobby and had a brief conversation. And I told him I was there for the march. And he invited me to go on stage with, when he made the big speech. And I respectfully declined. And the reason I declined was they had worked for a couple of years to put that thing together. And I hadn't done anything. And it would not be right, I didn't think, for me to go on stage and say, hey, listen, this is what we've done. And I hadn't done anything. So I sat in the first row and enjoyed it, but I didn't want to be one of those guys, hey, look at me.
Do you know if there's a photograph of you at the March on Washington? Have you ever seen one?
What's that?
Do you know if there's a photograph of you there?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
I don't think so. I was just one of the guys, one of the people there to support that.
Do you remember when he was killed? That's during the season in your next to last year, I guess.
Yeah. Well, when he was killed, we were playing a game the night he got killed in Philadelphia. And they asked both teams, what do you think? You think we should call the game off or play? Now, we think it would be a bad thing for the city of Philadelphia if we call the game off and you got 12,000 or 13,000 people under great stress and really, really annoyed, that's a quiet way of putting it, on the streets. And so we said, what we'll do is we play the game and we keep these 12,000 or 13,000 people in the game in time to cool off so that you don't have riots in the street in Philadelphia. That's the reason we played that game. Then we didn't play for a week or so. But those are things we thought about.
Mm-hmm. Did you know Ali much? After when you said,
Oh yeah, I knew him when he was a kid boxer, and always a fan because to reach the top of your field, it takes more than physical ability. You have to know what you're doing to get to the top of your field, no matter what the field. Because there are things you have to do to execute what it takes to be the top of your field. And so Ali was not only a great boxer, but he's a psychologist and a brave man. I was in Boston one day, and a guy says, I want you to disavow Muhammad Ali. What? I want you to put him in his place. I said, I'm not going to do anything like that. He said, you want to disavow? I said, heck no. He said, well, I think you ought to do that. I said, I don't care what you think. If I had a choice between you and Ali, you wouldn't even be in the race. Are you kidding? So he started calling me Felton X after that. You know, they used to call the Muslims with an X. You know, Malcolm X and all that. Us, you know.
didn't you, when he got drafted, didn't you organize a group of?
I didn't organize. Jim Brown organized.
Jim Brown organized, but you joined it, right?
Oh yeah.
Just to support his decision.
Yes. Well, you see, the thing is, what you have to think about is, for his decision not to go in the Army, if you read what it was based on, arbitrarily they decided to change his status without a hearing or anything. Just, we're going to change it. Well, that's not right. You know, from what category he was in, I'm not sure, but they changed it to 1A. So now we're going to put you in the Army. Well, you can't do that. You know, there's a...
Was that? I'm groping for a way to ask. What was the time that you felt was most controversial? Your most controversial stance?
Who, me?
Yeah, in your career, when you got the most heat for something that you felt or believed or said or didn't say.
Well, it started with when I got to Boston. I had not started to shave. Okay. You know, you reach a certain age and you say, okay, now you shave. I hadn't reached that when I got to Boston. So I spent the first 3 or 4 months there explaining why I had a beard and why I shouldn't shave it off. And the more they questioned, the more I dug in my heels. You know, because going back to college, as a freshman, they had to buy you a pair of shoes, basketball shoes. And I bought a pair of white ones. And the varsity coach says, we wear black shoes. I said, that's the varsity. This is the freshman team. He said, you should get black shoes so you'll be like the rest of them. I said, Coach, I had nothing I could ever do to look like the rest of these guys. there were two black guys there were four black guys on the varsity and the junior varsity, on the freshmen. So there's no way I was going to look like the rest of those guys, you know. And so one thing I got from my dad was to analyze and come to conclusions from my own perspective. See, I cannot tell you who your hero should be. And you'd be wrong if you think you could tell me who my hero should be. In fact, who was it? Bill Walton, who's a dear friend, and I think a really good guy, okay? We were talking about growing up, and at the end of the conversation, he said to me, we come from two different worlds. Really? You know, a friend of mine, a young guy named Yao Ming, he plays, he's retired now. He was playing for the Houston Rockets, and he asked if he could have a conversation with me. I said, okay. So he came to my house for dinner here. And we were talking about his career. And I said, there's one thing you should be very aware of and never lose sight of. You are a very tall Chinese man. Embrace it. I says, always embrace your mother and father and the culture you grew up in. And I said, always be true to who you are and what you are. And that, to me, is a positive thing, not a negative thing. Because you can be Chinese and love the Chinese without hating the Americans, which some people will try to conclude. You see, you can embrace who you are and what you are and be a positive impact in your life.
Let's pause for just a second.
Okay,
Okay, we're rolling.
we're ready to go? All right, we want to resume talking a little bit about your relationship with the city of Boston and how it changed from the time you were back there playing until modern days when you made peace to some degree with certain people there.
That never happened.
It never happened.
See, where other people thought I was bothered, but I was never bothered. I was, they got my attention about certain things, but I always was able to maintain control. Just like one of the things that annoyed the media there was they turned their head, they looked up, and I was gone. It just, I told Red, I'm finished, that I'm not going to do it anymore. He's the only one I told. And they were under the misconception that the things that they valued and the things that I valued were different. And as I told someone last month, I never, ever need to be validated. You know, I came, I did what I did, and then I left. And just like I told those guys on NBA TV, they said, how come they never pick you as the greatest player ever played? I said, first of all, that's irrelevant, and I don't even get into that, because nobody can know who the best player was. Because there is not an accepted standard that this is what the great player does. Now, spectators are the only real experts. Like, I want to tell you a story if you got time. I was working for CBS, and there was a game. The Lakers played the Sixers in Philadelphia, and Magic had to play center because Kareem was home with a migraine. And we were in a production meeting, and the announcer, who will go unnamed, started saying, we're going to have to start promoting, it's the sixth game. If the Lakers won, it was over. If the Sixers won, had to go to seventh game. So the announcer kept saying, well, we're going to have to start promoting the seventh game no later than the end of the first quarter. So after the third time he said that, he said, I said, why are you saying that? He said, well, without Kareem, the Lakers can't compete. And that game will be over the first 8 minutes. I said, the Lakers are going to win the game. And you know what he said to me? You do not know what you're talking about. Normally I just let it slide. But that time I just didn't feel like letting it slide. I said, yes, I do. I said, I know more about playoff basketball than anybody you ever meet. He says, well, how can you say that? I said, there are certain criteria you use in playoffs. First, there's matchups. You take Magic out of the backcourt and you're left with Norm Nixon and Michael Cooper up against Andrew Toney and Maurice Cheeks. That's a wash. Nobody has the advantage. I said, the way Jamal Wilkes is playing, he and the Doc, that's a wash. The other forward, Jim Jones, and either Caldwell Jones or Chuck and Thunder.
We're rolling again.
Okay, so you said that those were a wash, and
Dale Dawkins, Caldwell Jones, and
of the Sixers.
Jim Jones. That would be a Sixers advantage. Mm-hmm. I said, but the guy that's left is completely out of it. He's got to try to guard Magic. Magic's big and strong enough to guard him, but he can't even catch up with Magic. In fact, Magic, I surmise, was the top 3 fastest guys in the league in foot speed. So this guy, Magic playing center, he never see Magic, in fact. I said, so, okay, that's just matchups. This will be the 6th straight game that the Lakers have played this Sixer team. During the way, get to the 6th game, they've made adjustments.
Let's keep going.
They made adjustments. So they're familiar. Okay. Now, this is the first game that the Sixers would have played this Laker team with Magic at center. As great as Kareem is, you always know where to find him. He's down on the blocks, either left or right side. Magic, he might be selling popcorn for, he'd be all over the building. Okay. So now, the Sixers are going to have to start making adjustments as they go along tonight. By the time they make adjustments to this team, it'll be late in training camp next season. I said, so if the Sixers were to play the best game that any team in the history of this franchise had ever played, they would still lose. They do not have a chance.
Wow. Did you say that on the air too?
No, I said that in the production meeting.
Right.
And so we go in there, and exactly what I told you would happen. Jamal Wilkes got 35 points. Magic was uncontrollable. The backcourt was washed. In fact, a kid named Brad Holland came off the bench and got 10 points. And so the Sixers never had a chance. Oh, they were a good team. They basically went to the sixth game unarmed.
Yeah.
And so these are the kind of things you have to know to win in the playoffs, because every game is different.
Let's go back.
If the coach is any good. That's okay.
Let's go back to where we were talking a little bit before about your famous autograph policy. You surprised me. I didn't know this by saying that you didn't have it when you first started with the Celtics, but it came about almost by accident a few years later over signing basketball.
In 1964 is when I finally made a decision. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. And you said it had to do with signing basketballs?
Well, that's where it started. Well, and by that time, I started to get just a bit cranky. Okay. And off the basketball court, nobody could tell me what to do. Okay? That's Anita. We can yell at her if you want to. I spent from that time in '64, I think is where I stopped, until today. You'd be surprised that people try to figure a way to make me sign autographs. And when I first took the coaching job in Boston, they asked me Red asked me to do a couple of TV shows. And so this one guy says, well, now that you're coaching, you're going to have to start signing autographs. I said, no, I'm not. Hasn't Red called you and told you that you got to start signing autographs because you're part of management? I said, first of all, Red knew what I was before he offered me the job. I didn't just all of a sudden say, okay, now that I'm the coach, I'm not going to sign autographs. That's been my policy for years at the time. And I said, people keep asking me about that, and I want to tell you one thing, okay? If I say to you, I'm not going to sign autographs, that's the end of it. There's nobody you could tell that's, okay, you sign autographs. I said, if Almighty God said to me, you'll sign autographs, and I said no. Even he cannot make me sign autographs, if it's a he. He can strike me dead. But one of the things that God gave us all is a free will. And so, if I say I'm not going to do it, there's no point in talking about it. That's not going to happen.
Didn't you say that some of the Celtics faked your signature on basketballs, though?
Oh, yeah. Heinsohn, Ramsey, Sam. I think sometime Casey. They used to have a contest who could do the best Bill Russells.
So there are a lot of counterfeit Russell autographs out there on basketballs.
Oh yeah.
Well, I can remember in the 70s being out at restaurants with you when people would come up right in restaurants and walk right up and ask you to sign an autograph. And my memory is that you would say, because usually they would have their kids there, you would say, if you want to sit down and say hello and have a conversation, that's fine, but I'm not going to sign an autograph.
No, I said, one of the kids one time asked me about signing autographs. I said, to me, to you, it is not personal. It's a matter of policy. I said, I don't sign autographs. That goes to everybody, not just you, you know. And I have a choice, and I make the choice. And so most of the kids understand it. Mm-hmm. One of the things I used to always joke about, the guy says, I want you to sign an autograph. I said, I don't want to sign an autograph. He said, for my kid? I said, that's a bad trade.
Am I right in remembering that when you were asked about playing for Boston, you would say you never played for Boston, you played for the Celtics?
That's right. I played for the Celtics.
For the team, yeah.
Well, you know, after I retired, I moved to LA right away. And I was a season ticket holder for 4 years for the Los Angeles Lakers. And they had a ceremony for Jerry West. And they said, would you come to? Of course, I like Jerry a lot. So while I was there, they put me in a box next to Jack Kent Cooke, who owned the team. That was an experience. Anyway, a couple of days later, I get a call from Jack Kent Cooke. He says, I've been thinking about it, and I made a decision. I'm going to get you to come out of retirement and play for the Lakers. So I said, aren't you paying a guy named Will Chamberlain a lot of money to play for the Lakers? Now, how would he feel about being a backup center? Jack and Cook didn't think that was funny. So I said, no, I don't play basketball anymore. And if I did, it would only be for the Celtics.
Yeah.
That's the only time I would play basketball.
Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with the Red Sox over the issue of throwing out the first ball and your mentoring foundation and how that developed into your retirement recently?
Well, when I was Tom Benito, the mayor of Boston, asked me to come back to the Democratic National Convention and co-host his receptions. And he held his receptions in community centers all around Boston. And so while I was there, my agent at the time had set up for me to go out. It was the last series of the year with the Red Sox and the Yankees. And so that's a big deal in Boston. So he had set up for me to go out and throw out the first pitch. And so he says, we got to be over Fenway by 11. I said, I'm not going to Fenway Park. He says, why not? I said, because I'm not. I have nothing to do with the Red Sox. He says, well, I've already set up. I said, well, you have to unset it because I'm not going to do it. I have nothing to do with the Red Sox. I said, as far as I'm concerned, the Red Sox can burn in hell for eternity.
And why was that?
Well, when I was with the Celtics, the guy that owned the Red Sox said he would never have a black player. In fact, they were the last of the major league team to get a black player. They do not owe me or any other black person anything. That's their business to run the way they want to run it. That does not mean I have to associate with them. So, I was at a reception, and some lady walked up and said she works for the Red Sox. I said, okay. She said, well, why don't you come out and throw the first pitch? I said, I'm not having anything to do with the Red Sox. She said, well, the Red Sox have changed. This is different. I said, well, you show me that you have a program to facilitate the change, maybe we'll talk. That don't mean I'm going to come through. I said, you're not going to keep the same policy and get Bill Russell to come throw out the first pitch and say, see, we've changed. That's not just not going to happen. So, fast forward, I have a charity that I've been working with for almost 20 years. It's called mentoring. And we have, so far, a very successful program. We started out with the name one-to-one, one mentor, one mentee. Last year, 2012, we passed 8 million volunteers throughout the country. Was it 8 or 4? 4 million, I'm sorry. 4 million volunteers throughout the country that are one-to-one mentoring. And, but it's not just black kids. It's kids. In the Boston chapter, we've got a lot of Hispanic kids, a lot of Asian kids, a lot of black kids, a lot of white kids. The only requirement is you be a kid. And some adult want to spend some time helping you get started. And we have found that the adults that volunteer to be mentors end up profiting more than the kids, because you find out on a very personal basis how you can be helpful.
So you asked the Red Sox to become active?
Well, no, I asked Red Sox, they had 3 or 4 owners. I said, I want one of those owners to go on the board of my charity. Not to say we support it, go on the board. They said, well, don't you want a player? I said, no, I don't want a player. It's not that I don't respect the players or not, but the owners can make policy decisions. And the owner's not likely to get traded away. So their players on the Red Sox are, as far as I met and talked with them, are nice bunch of young guys who are prone to be active in the community. And so I said, but it's not to insult them. That's not the point. Point, I want somebody from the Red Sox that can make decisions and policy. So we got one of the owners to go on the board. And he's done an absolutely marvelous job. In fact, most of the people in New England think that mentoring is a Red Sox program. And I can live with that, you know, because that's the biggest voice in New England is the Red Sox. And they went all out. That's your fault.
How about this? We're going.
So the Red Sox stepped up to meet your conditions and support the mentoring
Yes.
foundation?
What they did was they got twice a year at Fenway Park, they have step up to the plate for mentoring. And on the Green Monster, they have a banner that lists the number of people they brought into the mentoring program. And for every Red Sox game, there are 4 seats set aside for 2 mentors and 2 mentees that have been together for 3 years or more. They're the guests of the Red Sox. And they've encouraged their sponsors and their anyway, they encourage people that do business with them to start mentoring programs in their companies. So they've been really super.
So when did somebody from the Red Sox call you up and say, we think we've met your conditions, we've tried to make a change, are you ready to throw out the first ball?
I did.
How did that go?
Didn't get it over the plate, though.
Wow, how long ago was that you threw out the first pitch?
Well, it must have been, it's more than maybe 6 years ago.
6 years ago. So after they won the World Series?
Yes.
The first time?
Because my late wife and I went back there a couple of times. And the Red Sox did something very nice. They started a scholarship for one of the inner city kids in Boston and named it the Mayor Nault Russell Scholarship. And
Named it for Maryland.
yes, and that really pleased me a lot because that was my good friend.
Mm-hmm. And so then, how long after that was it that the city of Boston, was it the mayor who approached you about the statue?
Yeah, well, after I got the Medal of Freedom, and Obama says someday there'll be a statue in Boston for Bill Russell, and I told him I'd never forgive him for that. Because when Tom Menino first told me about the statue, I said, you know, a statue sounds to me a lot like a tombstone. And he says, why do you say that? I said, well, you know, if you really, truly believe in God, He does not need a marker to find you. So I said, I would be willing to be buried in an unmarked grave because of that. If you really believe in God, He doesn't need a marker to find you. He'll know exactly where you are. And so when Tom says, well, I says, and besides, I don't need anything like that. He says, well, it's not so much for you as it is for the city. You've made a tremendous amount of difference in community and race relations. Because my way of thinking, I've not got past the place where we're beyond race. Even I ain't that dumb. But that can be, if you want it to be, a healthy part of community relations. That there is a difference. But they found out that when I made decisions, it was based on competence, not on race. And that's all that anyone could ask of anybody, is that if you're going to make a decision and race becomes a part of your decision-making process, what you have to really go to is competence. And like I used to always say, long ago, someone asked me, what would I think about a gay person playing in the NBA? This was years and years and years ago. And I said, I have one question. Can he play?
Let's pause for this. We're okay, we're rolling again.
All right. So when is the statue going to be unveiled?
Well, after I conceded we could do it, I pretty much put it on the back burner. And so they give me, Tom says, if we do this, we're going to have you make all the key decisions. And first I looked at 5 different sites in Boston with the city manager to see where we're going to put it. And we ended up at City Hall Plaza, which is adjacent to the Freedom Trail and near the old State House. And we're going to put a little bigger than the alley, but it's going to be like the Valley of Champions. And so for all the teams that have won championship, we'll have a star lead up to the statue. And they're going to have some of my pet phrases like, there are no such thing as other people's kids. They're all next generation Americans. Mm-hmm. And a few things like that.
On the statue?
No, on little plaques all around.
In the plaques, okay.
Yeah. So, but Tom did not have me convinced yet. And so he says, okay, we're going to set up a legacy foundation to support mentoring. And so every year we'll have fundraisers around the statue to raise money for mentoring. And that's a good way to get real personal community involvement in the educational system. And when you get that, you see, like I saw a thing on TV the other day, that in terms of literacy and all that kind of stuff, America's in the second 10, okay? Well, how are you going to maintain a viable part of the future if you don't educate the next generation? And the only way you can beat that is start a war.
Right.
You know, and so I don't think wars are helpful.
You mentioned getting the Medal of Freedom from President Obama. What was that experience like? And I understand that he.
Well, I said
said
at the
some nice
time,
things to you.
I think he's an extraordinary nice man, first of all, and a good person. But they asked me, is that the highest honor you ever got? I said, it's second. And I said, second? Yeah. Second? Yeah. Well, if that's second, what was the highest honor? Well, when he was 75, my father said to me one day, you know, I'm very proud of you as my son. I'm also proud that I'm your father. And this is my hero. And you can't top that. Not coming from the hero.
But it was a good second, right?
Oh yeah, it was a good strong second.
So what did he say about your helping him become president?
He just said that it was guys like me that made it possible for him to be president. I said, I don't see that, but thanks anyway. You know, I really like him on a personal basis. The first time I met him, we were dedicating the start of the work on the Martin Luther King Monument in Washington. And so he walks to me, I know you, you're Karen Russell's dad. And you know, it's funny, that's the same thing Bill Clinton said the first time I met him. You know, And so it just feels funny being a parent and have somebody say that about you. And I said, what about chopped liver?
You also mentioned, speaking of mentors and role models, that you were the only basketball pallbearer for Jackie Robinson. Is that right? How did that come about?
Oh, the only non-teammate.
The only non-Brooklyn Dodger teammate.
Right. Well, when Jackie started with the Dodgers, I was 13. And he was the essence of an athletic hero to us that played ball, not just baseball or football, but ball. Because he was a man that played baseball. And at that time, up until then, there was nobody like that. You know, there have been guys that had notoriety, but they were not stand-up guys. And so when Jackie died, Rachel Robinson called me and said, I want you to be a pallbearer at Jackie's funeral. Well, that's right up there with a close number 3, okay? And so I said, of course, just tell me when and where. I think not a lot of kids from the projects in West Oakland get to be a pallbearer for Jackie Robinson. And so I said, why me? She said, you were Jackie's favorite athlete. Well, as far as fans and all that kind of stuff, nobody else comes close to that. You know, Jackie was our guy as a kid. And for say that he turned around and respected me. And see, I took the attitude because of that. When I thought about it, I said, Jackie took us from point A to point B. First black guy in the major league sports, baseball. Well, when I got with the Celtics, I did not want to revisit that point A to point B. I wanted to go from point B to point C. That's why I was kind of halfway important that I coach. And the guy asked me once, how important is it to you, the first black coach? I said, it's not important. I said, first of all, I'm the best person for the job, for this particular job, and I know that. And second, it'll be important when coaches are hired and fired with no reference to race. Then it's important. So like now, coaches and managers are fired wholesale, okay? And nowadays, never is there reference to race.
Yeah. We should speak just a little bit here toward the end, because you mentioned Jackie as a role model, and about your relationship with we've talked about your teammates, but you also had some pretty celebrated rivals that you said your reaction with your relations with your adversaries were special because they made you play better.
Well, not only
Oscar and Wilt and Elgin Baylor.
Not only that, but at that time, with the NBA, I really seriously wished that every player in the NBA could find a position where he could play his best. Because then the people that went to NBA games would see the best players in the world playing their best. And I'd kick their ass at their best.
But that, in a way, didn't that indirectly lead to your part of your feud, I guess is not quite the right word, with Wilt, because he didn't play in your last game and you wanted him to make you earn it, that last championship?
Well, no, you know, I talked to Wilt about that. And I looked him in the eye and I said, Wilt, I apologize for the stuff I said. That was just hubris. You know, it was my last game and I knew it. And I don't want anything to make it less pleasant to me. And the reason I said things about him that I should not have said was I was speaking to a college group in Iowa, I think, and there was a reporter in there mixed in with the kids. I didn't know he was a reporter, okay? And so we do this question and answer. He said, well, you never would have won that last championship if Wilt hadn't got hurt. Well, it annoyed me. Of course, when Wilt left the game, we were 17 points ahead. You know? And I went off on Wilt, and he had nothing to do with it. And so I looked him in the eye and apologized to him and said it was just hubris. I was, not only that, I was wrong.
But you did want him to be in the game because
Yeah,
you got
because
something out of the competition.
well, no, well, also, as long as he's a game, we were 17 points ahead. I don't want to change that.
You said once in one of your books here about Dr. King, I had the same reservation about Dr. King that I had about the Vietnam War, which is that the white people in Boston liked him, so I knew something must be wrong. I guess that's a light moment, because there was a time when they were kind of superficial about race relations, because
Yeah, well, the reason I was there that was also in Boston at the time was a guy named Detroit Red. I think it was Detroit Red, who later became Malcolm X.
oh,
And they would love to put them at opposites, you know, and so they chose the doctor. Well, I said, if these people choose him, I gotta be suspicious.
well,
But, you know, what I always thought that, well, because I thought this way, there was a major problem, but there was not the solution. And those various R's, SNCC, NAACP, about 5 or 6 organizations fighting the same battle, but with different approaches. And I thought it was important that they all be able to maintain. You see, because when you get to a place where one organization speaks for a whole race, the race is in trouble because they're smart enough to figure out how to beat that. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like I had a conversation with Nelson Mandela, and I told him how respectful I was of what he did. And one of the things he did not do, he did not disavow violence. Now, he was not going to advocate a civil war. But he said that if he'd say he turns his back on violence, all of his comrades tried to change apartheid, they would put a target on their back. And so he wouldn't do that. So that there were probably a dozen or more groups in South Africa fighting apartheid, each with their own agenda and their own style of fighting the same problem. And so I've never put down any of those groups trying to change things.
Let me ask you three sum up questions to end. First of all, looking back on your career and your life, do you have any major regrets as to things that you would have done differently?
What's that?
Do you have any major regrets that you would have liked to have done differently?
I don't know. Philosophically, I was opposed to racism being part of the atmosphere. And I did what I thought I could do to help change it, or at least expose it. And
Expose it is a good first step.
yes, you can't ever help to solve a problem until you recognize it as a problem. So, I don't know. See, I was not your intellectual. Well, you know, I don't know if there's anything I could do to change it.
And how do you look at today's NBA? Because you're a part of it again. They've got the award named for you. You go to the finals. Compared to your NBA, and do you think the future of the league is still good?
Well, you know, I was watching the playoffs the other day, and there are a lot of good players, a lot of them. Like when I was playing, maybe 4 guys in the league could shoot 3-point shots. And every team's got 4 guys can shoot 3-point shots. You know, the game has changed, though. It's the most evolving of all the games. And so I always say that I would never ask a player to play against ghost, past, present, or future. You know, how would you have done against so-and-so? Well, that's a different time. You know, like a guy asked me one time, how would you have done against Shaq? I said, first of all, you got the question backwards. And I love that kid. I really do. I said, but you can't compare players of different eras. Because, for example, for all intents and purposes, I invented the block shot. Okay? I'd never seen a shot blocked until I started doing it. When Shaq was 4 or 5 years old, block shots were an integral part of the game. So he starts at 5, where I started at 18. Well, you can never compare that. You know what I mean? And there are certain standards. For example, when I was playing, there was no such thing as a zone defense allowed. We were not allowed to play zone. Now everybody plays zones. There are variations on it, but they're zones. And we had contempt for teams that played zones because they had at least 1 or 2 guys that couldn't play defense. And so the zone protected them. Well, now the zone's an integrated part of it, and if it's played right, it can be very effective.
So finally, this interview will become part of the archives of the new National Museum of African American History.
Taylor, you gonna put me in the archive?
I'm going to put you. I'm going in there. I'm going in there with you.
Hey, who are you, Indiana Jones?
Well, you're going to be looking out to an awful lot of people. Do you have any advice for young people that are going to come to this museum as to how they should go about framing their choices for their life?
Well, if you're fortunate enough to find something you do well, approach it professionally. Find out what it's all about, and how can you take what it's all about and make an improvement from your point of view. And you take things from a novelty to a professional. You know, things that you enjoy doing well. Well, now, when I was an activist playing basketball, first let me get that straight. We used to travel before the jet fleets. If it's foggy, you just stay there. And so you might spend all day at the airport. And so we were at the airport one time, I forget where, and this guy walked to me, you kind of tall. A very astute observation. You a basketball player? I said, no. So about 5 or 6 guys came up and asked the same question. You a basketball player? I said, no. So Havlicek was there watching this, and he said to me, how come you say you're not a basketball player? I said, John, that's what I do. That's not what I am. I'm a man that works at professional basketball. See, the misnomer is everybody says play. Well, you long since finished playing. You know, and if you don't know, the closest we came to playing was at Celtics, we had a motto. Play like children without being childish. And
Is that your motto, or was it written?
well, it was just in the air around there. I don't know who came up with it, but we took it. That and the way we won all those championships was we knew how to play. Now, that sounds odd. Everybody knows how to play, don't it? Well, not everybody does not have the total team concept. When I was at my best with the Celtics, I could run all our plays from all 5 positions. Point guard, shooting guard, small forward, big forward, post. I could run the plays from all those positions. Not that I wanted to run the plays. But if one of my friends was having a problem, I could understand it and know how to help. And you know where help comes from and how it comes.
So finally, have you been back to Monroe anytime? You talked about your mother and...
No. If I go there, it'll be under duress. No, it's like this, Taylor. I started my life in Monroe. And the white people in Monroe were really mean to me and my family. Still my grandfather. I mean, not just, well, but they were actually mean. Like the one time he's under sheriff or deputy sheriff. And my mother very proudly bought her a riding habit. You know, the little jacket and the pants with the flare and the boots. And the undersheriff walks up to her and says, you get off the street with those outfits on. You can't dress like no white woman. What's wrong with you? If I ever see you like that again, I'm going to put you under the jail. Scared her so bad, she probably shook for 2 or 3 days. Well, I don't feel like, well, I go back to my old hometown. No, that does not make sense to me.
No.
You know, and so I don't go to one unless let's see, after my mother died, I took my boys there once, and I think that's the only time I've been there.
You said you thought you might go visit her grave sometime. You've never done that.
What's that?
Didn't you say you might go visit her grave sometime?
Yeah, you know what? I would not know how to find it.
No. Well, she gave you an awful good start.
Yes, she did, and I really appreciate it. But I just don't get to that part of the country anymore.